They conquered the stars, tamed rivers, built cities that touched the sky, and vanished. The Maya were unstoppable until the world they mastered turned against them, the world of the living stones. Before the silence, there was sound, the sharp clink of obsidian on limestone as sculptors carved the histories of their rulers onto towering stone monuments, or stelae. The rhythmic chanting of priests from the misty tops of temples, the roar of the crowd in the ball courts where a brutal game held cosmic meaning. This was the world of the classic Maya, from roughly 250 to 900 AD, a civilization that didn't just exist in the jungle, they shaped it, mastered it, and made it their own. Unlike the unified Aztec or Inca empires, the Maya world was a patchwork of independent city-states. Think of ancient Greece, a collection of powerful rival cities like Athens and Sparta. The Maya landscape was much the same, dominated by superpowers like Tikal in modern-day Guatemala, its great rival Calakmul in Mexico, and other mighty centers like Copan and Palenque. Each was a kingdom unto itself, linked by a complex web of trade, diplomacy, and, as time went on, war. At the center of each kingdom stood the Kuhul Ajau, the Holy Lord, the king. This wasn't just a political office, it was sacred. The king was seen as a divine ruler, a direct channel between the mortal world and the supernatural realm. His blood was the most precious substance used in rituals to nourish the gods and keep the cosmos in order. His duties were immense: to lead armies in battle, to oversee the building of temples, and most importantly, to perform the ceremonies that guaranteed the sun would rise, the rain would fall, and the crops would grow. The lives of his people, the very stability of the universe, rested on his shoulders. The stelae in the plazas weren't just art. They were propaganda, meticulously recording the king's family tree, his victories, and his sacred rituals to cement his divine right to rule. This society was built on a foundation of pure brain power. The Maya were arguably the most advanced astronomers of their time. From observatories, they tracked the movements of the sun, the moon, and planets with obsessive precision. They could predict solar eclipses and calculated the 584-day cycle of Venus with an error of just a couple of hours. This wasn't just abstract science. It was essential knowledge that dictated everything from when to plant crops to when to wage war. This cosmic clockwork was recorded in their astonishingly complex calendars. They didn't just have one, they had several that interlocked like cosmic gears. The Zolkin was a 260-day sacred calendar for timing rituals and making prophecies. The Harb was a 365-day solar calendar that governed the agricultural cycle. For tracking history over vast stretches of time, they used the long count, a system so precise it could pinpoint a date millions of years in the past or future. It was this calendar that famously led to the 2012 apocalypse scare, when in reality, it was just the end of a major cycle, like our own calendar flipping over on New Year's Eve. The engine behind these calculations was their mathematical system. It was a base 20 system, elegant in its simplicity, using just 3 symbols: a dot for 1, a bar for 5, and a shell for 0. Their use of 0 as a placeholder was a landmark in human intellectual history, allowing for complex calculations far more advanced than those used by their contemporaries in Europe. This brilliance was matched by their engineering. In a land with few major rivers and a long, brutal dry season, water was life. The Maya engineered their cities to capture and store every drop they could. They built vast reservoirs, intricate canals, and enormous underground cisterns, called chaltunes, to get their dense populations through the dry months. And they did all of this without metal tools, relying on sharpened chert and obsidian, and without pack animals or the wheel, to move the millions of tons of limestone for their cities. The Maya were also the only civilization in the pre-Columbian Americas to develop a complete writing system. Their hieroglyphs recorded their history, mythology, and science on stone, pottery, and bark paper books. While most of these books were destroyed, decades of painstaking work have allowed us to read the majority of their stone inscriptions, letting the Maya speak to us in their own words. Their world was rich and complex. From the vantage point of the 8th century, a Maya lord in Tikal would have seen a world that seemed eternal, a cosmos held in perfect balance. But that balance was fragile. The very foundations of their success, their relationship with the land, their politics, and their reliance on the divine power of their kings, held the seeds of their own destruction. Unseen, cracks were already starting to form. The unraveling. Cracks in the cosmos. No civilization collapses overnight. The fall of the classic Maya was a process, a slow, grinding decline that unfolded over more than a century. It began as pressures that had been building for generations finally pushed the system beyond its limits, creating a cascade of failures. The unraveling is a story of 3 interconnected crises: a crisis of conflict, a crisis of kingship, and a crisis of the land itself. First, there was war. Conflict had always been a part of the Maya world, but in the late Classic period, from around 600 AD on, something changed. It escalated from ritualized battles to something far more destructive. For centuries, Maya warfare was mostly about prestige. The goal was to capture rival nobles for sacrifice or ransom to prove your city's dominance. But as populations grew and resources became strained, the goals shifted. It was no longer just about captives. It was about territory, resources, and the outright elimination of rivals. Archaeology paints a grim picture. Cities that were once open and sprawling started building massive defensive walls and moats. Inscriptions tell stories not just of capture, but of conquest and burning. A discovery at the site of Huitzna in Guatemala provided shocking proof. An inscription at a rival city, Naranjo, boasts that on May 21st, 697 AD, Huitzna was attacked and burned. When archaeologists checked the sediment in a nearby lake, they found a thick layer of charcoal that dated precisely to that time, physical proof of a fire that consumed the city. This wasn't a ritual battle. This was a scorched earth campaign, a full century before the final collapse began. This constant warfare created total instability. It shattered trade routes that brought in essential goods like obsidian and salt. It pulled farmers from their fields to fight, hurting food production. The Maya heartland became a landscape of fear, where city-states were locked in a desperate zero-sum game of survival. This escalating violence fed directly into the second crisis, a crisis of kingship. The whole Maya system rested on the authority of the divine king. His power came from his perceived ability to talk to the gods and keep the cosmos running smoothly. Victories in war and good harvests were seen as direct proof of his divine favor. But what happened when the wars were lost? What happened when the rains failed and the corn withered? The system wasn't built for failure. A king who couldn't deliver victory and food was a king who was failing at his most sacred job. His authority began to crumble. The late 8th and early 9th centuries were a time of political chaos. The old alliances fractured. We see it in the story of the king of Copan, 18 Rabbit, who in 738 AD was captured and beheaded by the ruler of a much smaller city that was supposed to be his subject. This was a shocking event, a major king executed by his own vassal, and a sign the old order was breaking down. As the crises mounted, people's faith in their rulers and the gods they claimed to represent began to dissolve. The third, and perhaps most fundamental crisis, was with the land itself. Maya civilization was built on its ability to support huge populations in a tough, tropical environment. At its peak, the population density in the Maya lowlands was among the highest in the pre-modern world. But this success came at a steep environmental price. Their main farming method was slash and burn. To feed millions, they had to clear vast tracts of jungle. Pollen records from lake beds show that over time, the Maya engaged in widespread deforestation. By the end of the Classic period, some areas were almost completely cleared of native forest. This had devastating results. Deforestation leads to severe soil erosion, making the land less and less productive. It also, crucially, changed the local climate. A dark jungle absorbs solar energy, while lighter-colored croplands reflect it. This change meant the land surface was cooler, which actually prevents the formation of rain clouds. NASA climate models have shown that Maya deforestation would have made the region measurably warmer and drier. They were helping to make their own droughts worse, soaring off the ecological branch they were sitting on. By the dawn of the 9th century, Maya society in the south was a system under unbearable strain. It was politically fragmented by war. Its kings were losing their authority. Its environment was severely damaged. The civilization was a tinderbox. All it needed was a spark. That spark came from the sky in the form of a climate catastrophe that would last for over a century. The catalyst. When the sky fell silent. The final act in the tragedy of the classic Maya wasn't written in stone, but in the earth itself. The story is preserved in the layered mud at the bottom of ancient lakes and in the growth rings of stalagmites deep in caves. By drilling into these natural archives, scientists have uncovered the story of a devastating century-long climate shift that delivered the killing blow to a civilization already on the brink. The evidence is overwhelming. By analyzing the chemistry of lakebed cores, scientists can track past rainfall. A high concentration of gypsum, a mineral left behind during dry periods, points to drought. In Lake Chichancanab on the Yucatan Peninsula, a thick band of gypsum from the 9th and 10th centuries indicates a prolonged and severe drought, maybe the worst the region had seen in 7,000 years. Even more precise evidence comes from the slow drip of water in caves. As water seeps through the earth, it forms stalagmites on the cave floor. The chemistry of each microscopic layer is a direct record of how much rain was falling at the time. A stalagmite from Gruta Tzabna, a cave in Mexico, provided a stunningly high-resolution picture of the climate during the collapse. The data reveals that between roughly 800 and 930 AD, the Maya heartland was hit by a series of intense, multi-year droughts. These weren't just slightly drier years, they were mega droughts, far worse than anything the Maya were used to. The research identified 8 separate droughts that each lasted for 3 years or more. Most catastrophically, it revealed one monster drought that lasted for 13 consecutive years, from around 929 to 942 AD. For a civilization so dependent on agriculture and rainwater, this was an apocalypse. The impressive water systems the Maya had built were designed to get them through the annual dry season, maybe a single bad year. But they were no match for repeated, multi-year and even decade-long failures of the summer rains. The consequences would have been catastrophic. Crop failures would have led to widespread famine. The great city reservoirs would have dried up, their cracked mudbeds baking under a relentless sun. Disease would have followed. With desperation came the breakdown of social order. This climate catastrophe struck directly at the heart of Maya authority. The king was supposed to guarantee the rains through his rituals. When the sky fell silent year after year, his power and legitimacy evaporated along with the water. No amount of ritual or sacrifice could make the rains return. It seemed the gods had abandoned them. Or worse, the king had lost his connection to the gods. We can see this crisis of faith in the archaeological record. During these droughts, the construction of new monuments and temples, the very act of recording a king's glory, grinds to a halt. Why carve the king's great deeds in stone when his people were starving? The response was desperate. In some cities, the people likely rose up against their failed rulers. In others, they just walked away, abandoning the great urban centers in search of water and food. The collapse was a rolling wave of abandonment that swept across the southern lowlands. The population of the Copan Valley peaked at around 28,000 people between 750 and 800 AD. By 900 AD, it had fallen to 15,000. By 1200, fewer than 1,000 people were left. The perfect storm had finally broken. Endemic warfare prevented any coordinated response. A degraded environment amplified the drought. A brittle political system shattered under the strain. And the mega-droughts were the final decisive blow. The great cities of the south, starved of water and faith, were emptied, left to the jungle. The aftermath and legacy, echoes in the jungle. The image of a mysterious, vanished people is powerful, but it's a myth. The Maya did not disappear. Their civilization wasn't extinguished, it was transformed. The collapse was a real and devastating catastrophe, but it was mostly contained in the southern lowlands, modern-day Guatemala, Belize, and southern Mexico. While the great cities there were being reclaimed by the jungle, Maya civilization was starting a new chapter elsewhere. The center of Maya life shifted north to the Yucatan Peninsula. Here, cities like Chichen Itza and Uxmal not only survived but thrived. These northern cities had access to more reliable water sources, including the deep sinkholes known as cenotes. Their political structures may have also been more resilient, perhaps governed by councils of nobles instead of a single divine king. Chichen Itza, in particular, became a regional superpower. Its art and architecture show a fascinating mix of Maya styles with influences from central Mexico, a sign of a more connected world. After Chichen Itza's decline, the city of Mayapan rose to prominence, ruling much of the Yucatan for over 200 years, until it too was overthrown in a violent revolt around 1450. Life continued in smaller states right up until the Spanish arrived in the 16th century. The Spanish conquest brought immense trauma, but it's also a story of incredible resilience. The last independent Maya kingdom, located deep in the heart of the old collapsed region, held out against the Spanish until 1697, nearly 200 years after the fall of the Aztecs. Even after conquest, the Maya people endured. They preserved their languages, traditions, and worldview, often blending them with Catholicism. They launched rebellions against colonial and national governments for centuries, fighting to keep their identity and their land. Today, the legacy of the Maya is alive and vibrant. More than 7 million Maya people live in their ancestral homelands. They speak over 30 distinct Mayan languages. They are farmers, artists, scholars, and activists. In many communities, traditional beliefs continue. The sacred round calendar is still consulted. Modern Maya spiritual guides, or day keepers, still perform ceremonies at ancient sites, maintaining a connection to a past that was never truly lost. The collapse of a political system is not the death of a people. So what brought the great civilization of the classic Maya to an end? It wasn't one thing. It was a complex systems failure. A civilization that had achieved a delicate balance with a difficult environment simply pushed that balance too far. Deforestation and overpopulation stripped away the land's natural resilience. An increasingly brutal cycle of warfare created constant instability, and a political system that placed all its faith in divine kings was left catastrophically brittle when those kings failed to command the heavens. Into this perfect storm came the catalyst, a series of devastating droughts that the crippled system could not withstand. It's a cautionary tale, not of a mysterious disappearance, but of the fragile links between climate, environment, and society. It's a reminder that no civilization, no matter how brilliant, is immune to the consequences of its own choices or the power of a changing planet. The silent stones of Tikal and Calakmul aren't monuments to a vanished people. They are a profound reminder of the heights a civilization can reach, and a sobering testament to how even the most advanced societies can falter. The Maya didn't disappear. They are still here. Their story didn't end in the 9th century. It continues today, an epic of collapse, resilience, and survival, with powerful echoes that still have much to teach us.